The air hummed with the thrum of advanced technology. Sleek vehicles zipped across elevated roadways, a symphony of motion against the backdrop of the massive Sawashan International Airport. This wasn't just an airport, it was a testament to human ingenuity, a gateway to a world where distance was a mere inconvenience. Towers of glass and steel pierced the sky, each a marvel of modern architecture. Above it all, aircraft of various sizes and designs soared through the air, their contrails painting streaks across the canvas of the twilight sky. Yet even amidst this spectacle of aviation, one aircraft stood apart, its sheer size dwarfing all others. This was QS73, a behemoth of engineering, its hull gleaming under the artificial lights of the airport. QS73 wasn't just an airplane, it was a flying metropolis. Its size was staggering, its wingspan a testament to the ambition of its creators. Within its metallic shell lay a world of its own, complete with luxurious accommodations, bustling shopping centers, and entertainment hubs that defied the very notion of air travel. To call it an airplane felt like a gross understatement. It was an experience, a destination in itself. The mere sight of it evoked a sense of awe and wonder. It was a testament to how far humanity had come, a symbol of progress and innovation. As it prepared for its long journey, the air seemed to crackle with anticipation, the atmosphere electric with the promise of adventure. For those about to embark on this journey, QS73 held the allure of the unknown, a world of possibilities waiting to be explored. Attendre. Attendre. The boarding process was a carefully orchestrated ballet of motion. Thousands of passengers, each with their own stories and destinations, converged on Gate 17, their voices creating a low hum that echoed through the vast terminal. Above them, holographic displays announced the imminent departure of QS73 to Melswith, the flight time a staggering 123 hours displayed in bold numerals. Griffin, his face etched with weariness, gently steered Pamela through the throng. He carried their single shared suitcase, his other hand resting lightly on his daughter's shoulder. Pamela moved as if in a daze, her eyes red-rimmed, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the sleek walls of the terminal. The weight of their recent loss hung heavy in the air between them, a shared burden that cast a pall over their journey even before it began. Inside, QS73 was a stark contrast to the bustling airport. The air was calm, the lighting soft and diffused, creating an atmosphere of quiet luxury. The gentle murmur of conversation and the soft chime of announcements were the only sounds that broke the tranquility. Pamela, still lost in her own world, barely registered the opulence surrounding her. The plush seats, the attentive staff, the subtle scent of jasmine in the air, none of it could penetrate the bubble of grief that enveloped her. Griffin, his own grief masked by an air of forced composure, guided her to their seats in the first-class cabin. He adjusted her blanket, his touch lingering for a moment longer than necessary, a silent plea for connection that went unanswered. Pamela leaned back against the headrest, her eyes closing as if to shut out the world and the pain it held. Memories flickered in the darkness behind Pamela's eyelids. Her mother's infectious laughter, the warmth of their small apartment in Shenyang, the comforting aroma of her mother's famous dumplings. These sensory fragments, once sources of joy, now pierced her heart with a sharp ache. It hadn't felt real, the suddenness of it all. One moment her mother was there, vibrant and full of life, and the next, she was gone, stolen away by an unforgiving illness. The forced packing, the hushed whispers, the finality of closing the door on their life in Shenyang, it had all happened so fast, leaving Pamela reeling in a whirlwind of grief and confusion. She hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her mother how much she loved her, how much she would miss her. Now, All that remained were these fragmented memories, bittersweet reminders of a life irrevocably altered. The present moment felt surreal. Here she was, hurtling through the sky at unimaginable speeds, strapped into a seat on a flying city, while inside, her world had shrunk to the size of her own grief. She couldn't comprehend how life could go on, how the world could continue to spin on its axis when hers had come to such a jarring halt. Anger, hot and raw, bubbled up inside her, directed at the unfairness of it all, at the universe for taking her mother away, at her father for his quiet, stoic grief that felt more like distance than comfort. She wished she could just disappear, melt away into the vast emptiness of the sky outside her window. The endless expanse of the night, dotted with countless stars, offered a strange comfort, a reminder of the insignificance of her own pain in the grand scheme of things. Yet even this cosmic perspective couldn't erase the gaping hole that her mother's absence had ripped through her heart. Attendre. The soft chime of an announcement marked the transition from takeoff to in-flight mode. The cabin lights brightened, revealing the full extent of QS73's interior. It was like stepping into a futuristic metropolis, a self-contained world of commerce and entertainment. Shops boasted holographic displays showcasing the latest fashions and gadgets. Restaurants offered a tantalizing array of cuisines, their aromas mingling in the air. The holographic sports center was a hive of activity. Passengers outfitted in haptic suits engaged in virtual reality games, their movements mirroring those of professional athletes in a hyper-realistic digital environment. Laughter and shouts of excitement filled the air as virtual tennis balls were smashed and virtual basketballs sailed through virtual hoops. Pamela, however, remained untouched by the infectious energy surrounding her. The opulence of QS73, its vastness and technological marvels, only served to amplify her sense of isolation. She felt like a ghost, drifting through this bustling city in the sky, invisible to the other passengers, lost in her own world of grief. Her father, meanwhile, seemed determined to embrace the distractions that QS73 offered. He busied himself with exploring the in-flight mall, browsing through shops, and even trying his hand at a virtual golf simulator. His attempts to engage Pamela in these activities were met with sullen silence or curt replies. The chasm between them, already present before they boarded the flight, seemed to widen with every passing hour. Unbeknownst to Pamela, Griffin carried his own burden of guilt and anxiety. A bureaucratic oversight, his failure to renew his Switzerlandic passport, had landed him in a bureaucratic quagmire. Confined to a small, sterile office within the aircraft, he found himself at the mercy of airport officials, his pleas for understanding lost in translation. The weight of his wife's passing, coupled with the stress of their relocation and now this bureaucratic nightmare, threatened to overwhelm him. His usual composure crumbled, revealing a man grappling with grief, fear, and the daunting responsibility of raising his daughter alone in a foreign land. He longed to bridge the gap that had grown between them, to offer Pamela the comfort and support she so desperately needed, but the words seemed to stick in his throat, choked by his own unspoken pain. Back in the first-class lounge, Pamela remained oblivious to her father's struggles. The plush surroundings, the attentive staff, the endless stream of entertainment options, none of it could penetrate the wall of grief she had erected around herself. She felt betrayed by her father's silence, his inability to acknowledge the depth of her pain. The more he tried to distract himself, the more isolated she felt. His attempts to engage her in conversation were met with monosyllabic responses, her tone laced with an icy resentment that stung him more than she realized. The distance between them, once a narrow crevice, had become a chasm, separating them in their shared grief. The air crackled with anticipation as Griffin, Jim and Johnny prepared for their whitewater rafting adventure. Clad in futuristic VR wetsuits, they laughed and jostled each other, their excitement palpable. Pamela, reluctantly accompanying them, felt a familiar pang of isolation. Her father, caught up in the moment, seemed oblivious to her emotional state. The holographic simulation was breathtakingly realistic. As they donned their VR headsets, the sterile walls of the sports center dissolved, replaced by the towering cliffs and roaring rapids of a raging river. Mist sprayed their faces as they paddled furiously, the roar of the water echoing in their ears. For Pamela, the simulated danger mirrored the turmoil within her. Each twist and turn of the virtual raft, each near miss with jagged rocks, amplified her sense of being adrift. She felt her father's presence beside her, but it offered no comfort. Their shared grief, instead of uniting them, seemed to create an insurmountable barrier. As the virtual raft plunged over a waterfall, Pamela cried out, a mixture of fear and frustration. She ripped off her VR headset, the abrupt transition from the virtual world to the sterile environment of the sports center, leaving her disoriented and breathless. Tears streamed down her face, a torrent of emotions she could no longer contain. Later that day, amidst the cacophony of the in-flight mall, Johnny finally mustered the courage to approach Pamela. He'd noticed her, of course, her quiet sadness drawing him in like a moth to a flame. His initial attempts at conversation had been met with awkward silences and polite but distant responses. Now, as he stood before her, bowling balls in hand, his heart pounded in his chest. He stumbled over his words, his cheeks flushing crimson as he invited her to join him and Martin for a game. To his surprise, she agreed, her hesitant smile the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The bowling alley, with its neon lights and upbeat music, provided a welcome distraction. As they bowled, sharing stories and laughing at their often erratic throws, a sense of ease settled over Pamela. Johnny, despite his initial awkwardness, had a way of putting her at ease. He listened with genuine interest as she spoke about her life in Shenyang, her voice softening as she shared memories of her mother. For the first time since her mother's passing, Pamela felt a flicker of hope. Johnny's presence, his gentle humor and genuine kindness chipped away at the wall of grief she'd built around herself. As they shared a plate of fries, their fingers brushing accidentally, Pamela allowed herself a moment of connection, a brief respite from the overwhelming sadness that had consumed her. Their newfound connection deepened as the days turned into nights aboard the airborne city. They spent hours exploring the holographic realms within QS73, losing themselves in the virtual landscapes of tropical beaches, snow-capped mountains, and bustling cityscapes. In these simulated environments, free from the constraints of their grief and the watchful eyes of their families, they allowed themselves to be vulnerable with each other. One evening, finding themselves in a simulated Parisian hotel room overlooking a virtual Eiffel Tower, the atmosphere shifted, the air crackled with unspoken emotions, their playful banter giving way to a charged silence. Johnny, emboldened by the intimacy of the moment, leaned in, his lips brushing against Pamela's. The kiss was electric, a jolt of pure emotion that sent shockwaves through them both. For a fleeting moment, the weight of their grief lifted, replaced by the exhilarating rush of first love. Yet as quickly as it had ignited, the moment ended. Pamela, overwhelmed by the intensity of her emotions, pulled away, her eyes filled with a mixture of longing and fear. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and heartache. Pamela, terrified by the intensity of her feelings for Johnny, retreated into herself, her initial openness replaced by a familiar wall of silence. Johnny, unsure of how to navigate the minefield of her grief, oscillated between approaching her and giving her space. The air between them, once charged with unspoken longing, now crackled with tension and unspoken hurt. Both of their families, sensing the shift in their dynamic, danced around the issue, their attempts at intervention clumsy and ill-timed. The weight of their unspoken emotions threatened to suffocate the burgeoning connection that had blossomed between them. As QS73 prepared for its descent into Melswith, the tension reached a fever pitch. Pamela, her emotions raw and exposed, lashed out at her father, her words a torrent of pain and blame. Griffin, finally breaking through his own wall of grief, pulled her into a hug, his own tears a testament to the depth of his love and the pain of their shared loss. In that moment of raw vulnerability, the walls they had so carefully erected began to crumble. Pamela, overwhelmed by her father's embrace, allowed herself to be comforted, her tears a release of months of pent-up grief. As the plane began its final descent, a glimmer of hope emerged from the wreckage of their pain. The final hours of the flight were filled with a strange stillness. The usual buzz of activity, the constant hum of technology seemed muted, as if the massive aircraft itself were holding its breath. The setting sun, a fiery orb sinking below the horizon, painted the clouds in a breathtaking palette of orange, pink and purple, casting long shadows across the rows of seats. Pamela sat huddled in her seat, her gaze fixed on the shifting colors outside her window. The turmoil of the past few days, the emotional rollercoaster of grief, anger and burgeoning love, had left her feeling drained, her emotions raw and exposed. The kiss she had shared with Johnny, once a source of exhilarating hope, now felt like a distant memory, tainted by her own confused response. Across the aisle, Johnny watched her, his heart aching with a mixture of longing and uncertainty. He desperately wanted to bridge the chasm that had opened up between them, to apologize for his clumsy attempts at comfort, to tell her that his feelings for her ran deeper than just a fleeting infatuation. Yet, the memory of her withdrawal, the fear in her eyes as she pulled away from his kiss, held him back. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the soft chime of announcements and the hushed murmur of other passengers. Every stolen glance, every hesitant breath, spoke volumes of their unspoken emotions. They were like two ships passing in the night, their paths briefly converging before diverging once more, the vast expanse of the ocean stretching between them. Griffin, his own emotional armor finally cracking under the weight of his grief and the realization of his daughter's pain, reached out to Pamela. He had spent much of the flight lost in his own world of sorrow, seeking solace in distractions rather than facing the raw emotions that threatened to consume him. But as he witnessed Pamela's struggle, her desperate attempts to navigate the choppy waters of grief and burgeoning love, a profound shift occurred within him. He realized that his role as a father extended beyond simply providing for her material needs. He needed to be present for her emotionally, to offer her the support and understanding she so desperately craved. Across the aisle, a similar scene unfolded between Johnny and his father, Jim. Jim, a man of few words but deep empathy, had watched his son's infatuation with Pamela blossom into something more profound. He recognized the signs of heartache in Johnny's eyes, the way his usual exuberance had dimmed in the face of Pamela's withdrawal. In his own quiet way, Jim offered his son a silent message of support. He reminded Johnny that sometimes the most powerful gestures were those unspoken, that simply being present for someone, offering a listening ear and a non-judgmental heart, could be the greatest gift one could give. As QS73 began its final descent, the cabin lights dimmed, signaling the imminent end of their journey. The cityscape of Melswith gradually emerged from the horizon, its twinkling lights a beacon against the approaching twilight. Inside the aircraft, a strange sense of anticipation mingled with the bittersweet realization that their time aboard this airborne metropolis was drawing to a close. Griffin, his hand still resting gently on Pamela's arm, leaned in close, his voice a low murmur in her ear. He spoke of his own grief, his struggle to come to terms with the loss of his wife, his regret for not being more present for Pamela in her time of need. He didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. He simply shared his own journey, his own messy, complicated experience of grief. Across the aisle, Johnny, emboldened by his father's silent encouragement, gathered his courage. He leaned towards Pamela, his heart pounding in his chest, his palms sweating. He didn't try to force a conversation, didn't try to fill the silence with empty words. He simply offered her his presence, his quiet understanding, his unwavering support. As the plane touched down on the runway, a collective sigh rippled through the cabin. The seatbelt sign chimed, and passengers began to stir, gathering their belongings, preparing to disembark. Pamela and Johnny, their hands brushing as they both reached for their seatbelts. Their eyes met in a moment of unspoken understanding. The future was uncertain, their paths beyond this shared journey unknown, but in that brief exchange, a promise was made, a connection forged in the crucible of shared grief and the fragile hope of new beginnings. The wheels of QS73 met the tarmac with a gentle thud, breaking the spell that had enveloped the passengers during the final moments of their journey. A collective murmur rippled through the cabin as the seatbelt sign blinked off, signaling the end of their airborne odyssey. For some, the chime was a welcome sound, a return to the familiar rhythms of life on solid ground. For others, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, a step into the unknown with all its attendant anxieties and uncertainties. Pamela and Johnny rose from their seats, their movements mirroring each other's as if an invisible thread still connected them. Their hands brushed as they reached for their bags, a jolt of electricity coursing through their veins. They had landed in Melswith, a city both foreign and familiar, a place that held the promise of new beginnings and the lingering shadows of their shared grief. The terminal was a cacophony of sound and motion, the clatter of suitcases on the moving walkways, the excited chatter of reunited families, the multilingual announcements echoing through the vast space. Yet amidst the chaos, Pamela and Johnny found a bubble of calm, their hands instinctively seeking each other's as they navigated the throng. Their families, witnesses to their unspoken connection, trailed behind them, their expressions a mixture of amusement and quiet understanding. Griffin, his face etched with the fatigue of the journey and the emotional upheaval of the past few days, couldn't help but smile as he observed his daughter. The spark in her eyes, the lightness in her step, were a testament to the healing power of connection. A testament to the fragile hope that had taken root amidst the wreckage of their shared grief. As they stepped out of the terminal and into the cool night air, the city of Melswith stretched before them, a symphony of light and glass against the velvet canvas of the night sky. The air hummed with the energy of millions of lives intertwined, a stark contrast to the sterile, controlled environment of QS73. Pamela took a deep breath, the crisp night air filling her lungs, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of a fresh start. Beside her, Johnny stood in silent contemplation, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his expression a mixture of apprehension and excitement. They had landed in a new world, a world where their paths would continue to intertwine, their destinies forever linked by the shared experience of that extraordinary flight. The journey aboard QS73, a journey that had spanned continents and traversed the vast emotional landscapes of grief and love, had come to an end. Yet, its impact would reverberate through their lives, shaping their choices, coloring their perceptions, forever reminding them of the fragility of life, the transformative power of connection, and the enduring nature of hope. The flight of QS73, a microcosm of life itself, had taught them that even in the darkest of times, even amidst the wreckage of loss and the uncertainty of the future, there was always the possibility of finding solace in unexpected connections, of discovering strength in vulnerability, and of embracing the unknown with open hearts and a shared sense of wonder.